The next presentation, and it looks like it's on board book pages 17 to 42, is strategic planning. We have Chief of Staff Tiffany Sharman up, and I'll let you introduce your guests. Thank you for being here.
I will do so. Thank you, Vice Chair Bauer and directors. Tonight I have two guests. I'll introduce them here in just a second. I want to make sure that we can go ahead and share our screen. So Gail, Kathy, feel free to queue up your presentation. Thank you. Very good. So board, this evening, Tiffany Shireman, Chief of Staff, and tonight I'm here to initiate a revision to our current strategic plan. North Clackamas School District last underwent strategic planning in the 2017-2018 school year. And that current strategic plan that I know many of you find very familiar has served us very well. It's not lost on me that tonight is the night that my original copy has started to dog-ear there a little bit, or small tear in it. It will serve us well through the rest of this school year. We are moving forward, though, in the revision of a new school year as this one, or a new strategic plan as this one sunsets at the end of this school year. As we look to initiating a new strategic plan, we sought out some organizational development experts who could support the school district in the development and then implementation of our next strategic plan. Following a request for information process and interviews, material reviews, more interviews, we found that Studer Education was an industry-leading firm whose processes and supports best aligned with the work ahead for North Clackamas. Their consultancy model is grounded in an inclusive stakeholder voice, valuing the diversity of thought within communities, and applying thoughtful organizational development principles. The two consultants that North Clackamas is working with will facilitate the bulk of tonight's presentation. Since June, our presenters have developed work plans and held trainings for the executive team, provided coaching for Superintendent James' executive team, focused on how to develop a school district that responds to today's needs while building strategic priorities for the future. It's a tricky endeavor, particularly right now in the climate and within our pandemic. So this notion of living in the today and planning for the future, it's been quite tricky. Dr. Gail Juno Butler joins us tonight, and she comes to this work with a strong background and focus on inclusive strategic plan design. Dr. Kathy Apollo comes to this work with a long background of facilitating K-12 public school performance growth. Gail's work is primarily tied to the development of the strategic plan, and then Kathy's work is primarily tied to the implementation of the strategic plan. It's my pleasure to introduce both Gail and Kathy to you.
Thanks, Tiffany. Appreciate that so much. Thank you, Board of Directors, for providing some time for us to share tonight our work together. And what we're going to do is we're going to share two things: the pathway of the strategic planning process and how the organizational excellence work that we're doing with the executive team and the leadership will come together to not only develop a strategic plan, but also have a pathway for operationalizing a strategic plan. So I'll introduce Dr. Gail Juno Butler, and she's going to open this up for us. So Gail.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. So glad to be a part of this process. May I borrow your language and that colorful graphic and wonderful videos and say, if I had to name my superpower in Studer Education, it's strategic planning. It's the work that I love. It's the work where I seem to land the most. And for the first time ever, I get to work with the partner that I am closest to. We started at the same time, Dr. Kathy Apollo. So I think this is just right in terms of at least the energy that we bring to a partnership in a pretty unique and new way for the two of us. So as Kathy indicated, we are Studer Education. Studer Education is Huron. So Huron Consulting Group is our overarching title for our company. And we want to open with paying attention to what we value in an overall grand and overarching way. And that's, we approach our strategic planning work, our organizational excellence work with our diversity statement by living that out in all of the actions that we take and the engagements that we have with each other and you and your stakeholders. And that's, we embrace the different perspectives and draw on that strength in terms of diversity. So this strategic plan, it's nothing new to you, but the next version of it will only be as strong as we are to our diversity statement. And I will tell you that Kathy and I live that at the front of the value system of our work. On the right side, just a guide of the way that we approach the framework. It's our partnerships are across the country, and they're anchored in projects in which continuous improvement and performance excellence and organizational excellence are at the forefront. So as Tiffany indicated already, Kathy's the person who brings it all together, but it's easier to bring all together when there's a strategic plan to guide what those years or the cadence of the work will be. The second part, I've already talked about the strategic planning as part of our work, leadership training and development. We have a host of surveys. We provide coaching at multiple cascaded levels with teachers. And we help to build that system of what are the big aims, the goals, the accountability system, but not only the accountability system, what's the system for monitoring progress? How do we coach on agility? So a strategic plan is a document and it's fixed, but it only lives and breathes just as we do in humanness with agility of an organization as it shifts and moves over time too. And you'll see that bottom, which I think is important to you all, and it's certainly important to us. We have experience in the organizations with whom we work with on a daily basis for our contracts. Kathy, if you go ahead and go to the next slide, I won't take near so long. That was my setup slide. Why do we need a strategic plan? I'm talking to the choir here, but I want you to know from a Studer Ed perspective, it's a tool, it's a document, but it's also a communication plan. So rather than or in the name of overcoming that often heard comment or statement at this moment in time of we have a lot of things that we throw at the wall and try to see what sticks. This is to overcome that approach to what do we do with work in this sort of post-pandemic environment to figure out what it is that's next. How do we galvanize around what's next? How do we make decisions? And then that communication piece of driving commitment. You know, the next part, a strategic plan comes from the vision, mission, those traditional values, the goals over a period of time, generally 5 years. So it's system thinking. So Kathy is the organizational excellence coach. And the entire system, at least in part, is generated from the way that we are inclusive and build the next model of North Clackamas based on stakeholder input and formalize that into direction for those critical few things that matter to improve. Keep on moving, Kathy. What is a strategic plan? I've already talked about as much engagement as possible. We've already set a really high standard in working with Tiffany and thinking through who possibly might want to be involved, who needs to be involved, who might we overlook. And we'll continue to do that every 2 weeks. We'll continue to have conversations about who's at the table, who's missing from the table. I've already talked about it's an organization's commitment to long-term goals and strategies in a focused direction. And it becomes that guiding framework that Dr. Laura Paulo will then assist you in moving into the it's late at night, operationalizing into actions around improvement. But it's not, it doesn't cover everything that we do. It's not one person's idea. It does not give you the how-to. This is only the goals. It's not the how-to part. And it's going to be responsive. It's going to be to some degree agile in terms of strategies that get to the goals over time. All right, Kath. Here's just 2 views. Ultimately, I think this is in alignment with everything you've said tonight. The big picture is how do we create pathways so that our students are future ready? That's the biggest of the aims. And in terms of the stakeholders, it's those traditional anchors that we look at, mission, vision, values, and looking at do we shift those? Do we change them all together? How do we use our anchors and adjust our anchors to ensure that we're serving in the ways that we wish to serve? Next slide, Kathy. You already know this, but it's a visual in a different way. We'll look at your vision. We'll look at your mission, your values. What we call pillars are those top priorities. So often that's around student success, team, finances, maybe community partnerships. It's those big rocks of a school district or an organization's desire in terms of vision. And then of course it begins to become more granular after the pillars and priorities in terms of goals and strategies. So just a different way to see the various parts of the strategic plan. Next slide, Kathy. Here's our process: discover, gather, analyze, talk to as many people as you indicate we need to talk to. So that's really part 1. Talk to as many people, provide us with as many environmental scanning reference documents. Tiffany's already given many of those to Kathy and us to look at. And that's in the name of connecting the past and what's worked and what we want to keep with the connection to the future so that it's not entirely different, but it's building on what's worked. Second part is we begin to refine and we get input on whether we're heading in the right direction, kind of move from those big rocks to goals and strategies. That's part 2. And then when we get to a good place of stakeholders feeling like we're on the right track and we're near the end, is when we move to the approval processes. So all of the approval channels, and then of course communicate that back to individuals who participated. I'm getting to the end of my section here. Next slide, Kathy. We do the facilitation of the gather and analyze phase that I talked about. We, again, begin with the heart of that diversity statement of ensure that the diversity of a district or organization is represented. This we have at this moment with Tiffany worked on who will participate at the executive team level. We're going to have the steering team level. So lots of individuals, lots of moving parts. for determining whether we're moving in the right direction, but also serving as ambassadors to cascade the progress throughout the organization. Next slide, Kathy. The discovery sessions, which I think this is the language of you guys, and we like it so much, we're borrowing it forever, Tiffany. The discovery sessions are when we'll actually meet with groups. We'll meet with groups face-to-face. If telephone works and that needs to happen, we will meet with groups that way. We can organize Zoom sessions, but they will mainly be around these open-ended questions here. So as we're sharing these, at some point it'll be your turn to think about what your contributions are from this perspective. In fact, I think that may be in October, but I'm sure someone can correct that if I'm not correct. I think it's at the October board meeting. But here's the questions. Imagine 5 years from now and the district's achieved its mission of empowering students to excel. What would a postcard say? How would we know we're successful? That's that creative energy question that gets people thinking in forward moving sorts of ways. And then the traditional questions, what's going well? What needs improvement? What are the values that matter most? I will take care of managing most of the logistics of the data and the transcriptions, but the steering theme will also be part of the analysis of the results so that it's not Gail Juno Butler's perspective. It's Gail Juno Butler doing the heavy lifting, but organizing the work so that that any other leaders involved in the process can determine what's right and what's not right. All right, Kath. Here specifically, I talked about moving to October and having some time to think about your startup in this process. These are 2 questions we'll hope you'll think about. Are there priorities you believe are important as we initiate the strategic planning process? And are there desired outcomes or processes that are priorities for you? So again, in a more formal form in October, you'll respond. In terms of what else can we do to gather data and analyze, we might decide that we need to survey as a way to get more inclusion into the process. And our surveys not only ask yes, no questions and Likert scale questions, but there are comments included. So those can be valuable to the gather and analyze stage. And Tiffany and I talked about 4 languages that would be important to North Clackamas. So we're talking through how to provide that capability and make it as positive and smooth and effective as possible. So surveys are part of gather and analyze. Here's a potential timeline. You can see that this is basically a year-long process. So the goal would be to be ready to go by the time the next school year kicks off, by the time AY 22-23 kicks off. Next slide. I want you to know, and I think this may be my last slide, that, and I've referenced this, but a steering committee for North Clackamas will be the group. I, as the coach for the strategic planning process, will lean on to course correct or to enhance or to totally redirect how the strategic planning process is going. I'll facilitate that group. We'll look through the data. And I would really call this group the group that moves us in the right direction toward that launch of August. Next slide, Kathy. And this shows you that over time, and this begins to be Kathy's work, by the way. We create the strategic plan. From that strategic plan, we operationalize with the scorecard. That will be the tool for making it come to life. And once that happens, the scorecards become alive and well with owners in the various schools and departments. That's the next step.
Thanks, Gal.
Thank you.
So I'm just going to pause here on this slide as I share the part that that really moves us into continuous improvement, and also kind of as a connector to operationalizing that strategic plan. So what's wonderful about the strategic plan is it gives us those strategic priorities, but then as we operationalize it, the district scorecard helps build now the internal systems alignment, that image where you saw those arrows moving in the same direction. And as the district begins to cascade that to the work and to the strategic priorities and the actions that go along with that, the how that Gal was mentioning, then we begin to cascade that through the district. So we go from district scorecard to departmental and school scorecards eventually over time. Continuous improvement is really about just getting better at getting better. And so part of the work that we do with organizational excellence is we try to focus on how can we support you in that work. And to do that, we have what we call an organizational excellence framework. It starts with defining success. That's the work that you'll be doing with Gal. That's the work that you will be doing with your senior leadership team. And then beginning to develop leaders and people to really focus on what are those skills and those fundamental pieces that are important to lead a system. And then we work on processes what we call always actions that create the habits and the behaviors so that we can execute on the work that we're doing. There are three fundamental things we do when we talk about execution. We work on accountability, and not from a punitive sense, but from a you can count on me as a member of this shared team. We work on reliability. Did we do what we said we were going to do? And we work on consistency. Are we creating routine protocols and processes that we consistently do to help with the success of any execution that we have? These things rest on the 9 principles of organizational excellence. These are leadership skills that we develop, and they're really important. So let me share with you those 9 principles that we build our leadership work around. You can see that we start with the first principle, that's commit to excellence. Really powerful piece. You know, it's about the commitment, and the work that you're doing with strategic plan is a way of really showing that commitment. As you notice these and you look at these, there'll be areas of strength and things that you're already doing really well. And then there'll be areas where you may want to know more or take a deeper dive with. That's some of the work that we'll do together. The other thing that we focus on is people first. We work around that idea of engaging people, then working on services, everything, culture. So we go from people to culture. How do we build a culture around improvement, a culture around service? We introduce strategies, we introduce tactics, we introduce tools so that we can help with the execution of those things and the consistency and reliability of those things. And then that helps us accelerate results. So my work primarily is really supporting the leadership development, supporting the strategic priorities, providing tools and resources and tactics that will help us get there, and also creating opportunity for people to come together and have shared ownership over those strategic priorities. So before we close, we just wanted to pause to see if there were any questions for us tonight.
Thank you. Let's do a quick round robin again. Director Benaloga, any questions, comments?
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. It was a very detailed report. I appreciate that. I actually had went to your website today. I was the last couple of days to listen to some of the podcasts, so I appreciate that. It's good information. I'm glad to hear you talk about diversity and equity inclusion. I do think they're not, I understand that there are a lot of the language is out there, but we really want to focus on that as a district. Really want to focus on, I hope you noticed with our administrators this evening as they were getting introduced, how many of them are from the district, but from other that started in another position or have been with the district for a while. And that's absolutely something that we want to continue to focus on. I think when we honor our staff, we also honor our students and we honor the history of North Clackamas. So I think that's a wonderful way for us to continue to have wonderful educators and be bringing up some very successful students in our district. So I appreciate it and I look forward to hearing more and finding out more about how we're going to move forward. So thank you.
Thank you, Director Benaloga. Director McVeigh?
Nothing for me, except I'm looking forward to the process.
Great, thanks. Director Schradel?
I have no feedback other than to say thank you.
Great, wonderful. Director Wade?
Thank you for the presentation. I also found it very informative, and this will be my second review of working on our strategic plan. So it's very exciting that we're going to continue to work with stakeholders, prioritize community involvement. And I think it would just be very interesting to see how we're going to do a lot of these gatherings in light of just what's currently happening right now. And a lot of us are still working in a remote meeting space. So I'm sure you all will have lots of ideas, but I think I'm really just excited about some of the things that you mentioned around involving youth voices. I think is very important. We're hopefully starting up a committee this year that is really just focused on youth and their leadership and perspective on things. So really excited about this, and thank you so much. And as Director Benaloga also referenced, I think retaining, hiring, continuing to diversify our workforce is so important. So I just want to continue to echo the diversity, equity, and inclusion values that we have in our district to move us forward. So thank you.
Thank you, all board members. Great comments. I think I'll just add that I liked the phrase bringing people together, because we need that more than ever. And this and take advantage of the opportunities that we have to learn from the last couple years, the change in education. So thank you so much. Anything else, Director or Chief of Staff, Chairman?
Vice Chair Bauer, we will be back together on this topic for strategic planning on our October 14th board meeting. Just to prep you a little bit for that, we're hoping to have a less formal presentation and more of a informal discussion, seeking your input on in a discovery session kind of format with some open-ended questions, and just to prepare you for that setting October 14th.